microphone on, so we'll start that again. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to those joining us at home and to those in the room here at Pathfinder House. It's Cabinet meeting this evening. So we have a relatively busy agenda with some fairly big items on it, but we'll go through the usual procedures. So have I got apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Howell.
Thank you very much. If we move then to the minutes of our last meeting, which were back on the 15th of July, they have been circulated. Is there anything there anybody wishes to raise a question about or seek to address? Because if not, I'm going to propose that they are approved. Can I have a seconder, please, then? Thank you. Thank you. No, you see, we haven't met for a little while. Thank you, Councillor Harvey, because I looked at you and forgot your last name as Councillor. I was going to call you Joe, but I won't do that because we're on the telly, so I'll call you Councillor Harvey. Can we then move to a vote, please? All those in favour? Thank you. Right, okay, and I will sign those. I'll sign them with that pen because it won't smudge. Do you need every page initialed? Yes, please. Yeah, lovely. Belt and braces. There we are. Perfect. Thank you very much. In which case then, can we move on to item 2, which is members' interest? Do any members have any interests that they need to declare at this point in the meeting? No? Okay, and you know the procedure. If anything comes up through the course of the evening that you feel that you wish to declare and need to declare, please just let me know. Moving on then to item 3, this is the Paxton Pits Nature Reserve extension of leases. And Councillor Kerr, I think this is going to be you, but I can see some officers moving to the table, so I think you might be ably assisted. I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Conboy. So Paxton Pits, what we're seeking to do is gain approval to get delegated authority of the senior officers to fully execute the leases for the land adjacent to the nature reserve of Paxton Pits. It's actually going to make it quite a sizable, by about 3.5 times bigger, I think. Following the completions of the gravel extraction. The other parts of it is also because it was such a long time ago that we agreed it, we just want to go back round the loop to re-agree the position so that we know that the council, we have the confidence of the council to approve the scheme and to have delegated authority of the senior officers to proceed with that. And finally, we want to, looking for approval for Head of Leisure and his team to explore the wider opportunities to develop new site, looking for parks, support wildlife, sustainability, well-being, as well as more sustainable financial opportunities too. So I'll just hand over to the team. Greg?
It's all right, we're just making sure the slides are visible on screen, so hopefully people at home can see those too.
Thank you. Good evening, Cabinet. For the purpose of the report, we're seeking approval on 3 recommendations set out within the report. Firstly, it's to fully approve and give delegated authority to fully execute the leases for the land adjacent to the current nature reserve at Paxton Pits. To agree and approve the feedback from 3C Legal Shared Services outlined in section 10 of the report, which provides confidence and clarity to the council in moving forward with the extension of leases, and to support principally the officers engaging in wider efforts to acquire land and buildings in connection with the principle of exploring wider opportunities to develop existing sites, but also new possibilities of new sites across the portfolio to support wildlife and conservation, health and wellbeing, physical activity and commercial sustainability opportunities. I've got a short presentation just to take you through, if I may, on Paxton Pits. Some of you may have seen this previously. So just to give you some background, the current reserve is about 78 hectares, consisting of lakes, meadows, grassland and scrub and woodland. It's a former quarry site since the 1940s, and it's set to exceed and expand to about nearly 3.5 times the size, to about 280 hectares. And the land there will be transferred over to HDC through management plans up until and including 2029. The background, so as Councillor Kerr alluded to, this was originally agreed by the form of administration in 2006 under a Section 106 agreement. So essentially it's already approved, but because of the lapse of time, we felt it was the wisest thing to do to bring it back through the political process to gain oversight and approval based upon the recommendations within the report. And the three parties involved, HDC, Oxford University and Thornhill Estates, are all outlined at the bottom. So the key issue around this was that in 2008, because of the economic crisis, effectively the site was mothballed based upon cost. So in 2017, planning permission expired and Aggregate Industries developed and revised proposals and submitted those to Cambridgeshire County Council. And in 2017, it was felt that the 2007 lease needed to be annexed and updated through the Section 106 agreement. So the current position is that all parties are on the same page with the leases, and they're substantially in the same format as the 2006 leases. You can see there what HDC will enter into between ourselves, TOF, Holcim, and the overarching agreement with Thornhill. Effectively, we surrendered the original lease in 2007, and you can see the size and the scale of expansion on the current site on the image on the right-hand side. The new leases will expire in 2087. The use of the land will effectively be an extension of the Nature Reserve with a definition in the National Parks and Access Countryside Act. The management of the site is governed by a reserve and a management plan which is currently in place and has been monitored for several years by the existing ranger team and will continue to be done so, and it will all be managed in alignment with the Section 106 agreement. So you can see that the wildlife benefit, we have people not only just travelling all across the country to come in to this reserve, but from across the world as well, based upon the wildlife that is on offer to be viewed as well. I won't go through the list there, but you can see that the remaining 60% of the site will be of special scientific interest as well. That will all be brought into the existing, in addition to the existing reserve. The wider community benefit, which is one thing that is a positive to this, not only the wildlife benefit, but the extension of cycleways and footpaths, supporting the wider health and wellbeing benefits for our local residents. It also marries up with the recent commercial investment strategy that we've been looking at for our parks and open spaces to identify more wider opportunities to develop football, bringing more visitors from local and nationally and across the world to develop revenue opportunities as well, which will be coming forward in the near future. So partner collaboration, again, I forgot to introduce, but this is Kirsty Drew, Open Spaces team leader, first cabinet this evening, who's been pivotal to helping me and developing this presentation and the cabinet report as well to ensure that we can get this across the line for signatures. So in March 2025, obviously the National Minimum Planning Association Quarries and Nature Awards, Kirsty was there with obviously the other organisations and was awarded based upon the nature and the heritage of that particular site. Friends of Paxton Pits, just a bit of background there, started in 1995. The benefit here is that there are a number of different ways they generate revenue as a charity, and at the moment there's around £250,000 that they have in a bank. Half of that is essentially set aside redeveloping the extension of leases once we take that and sign the leases, and about half of it is earmarked to develop and invest in their current reserve as well. So significant investment once the leases are signed to move forward. Positively as well, the Friends group have actually subsidised a new countryside ranger apprentice as well for the next 30 months. That was done in line with obviously the extension of leases, but that will support not only the person's education, and that's been fantastic news because it was one of our weekend rangers that got promoted into the full-time apprenticeship role. So that's really great news, and obviously that will support the land transfer. Next steps, political approval this evening, hopefully. The leases can be then signed, and you'll note within the report that between October and December, we hope to take that forward with our legal team to get the leases fully executed, and then in January to March, mobilise and ensure our teams and our partners are ready to operate the site and ensure that that's ready for the new financial year. Any questions? So I've rushed through that.
No, it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you. I suppose I'm going to open this for any questions to officers. Kirsty, welcome this evening. Any questions to officers, and then I guess we can then move into debate, but you might have some technical questions that you'd like to ask. Does anybody have any? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I suppose sort of the obvious as well as potentially fairly challenging question so many decades hence is at this stage, in light of the leases we're entering now, what the reasonable expectation is of the position that, you know, we or possibly more likely our successors would be in at the conclusion of the lease, given we wouldn't be taking permanent ownership.
So within the leases, obviously they're set out to 2087 as identified, and obviously those leases do incorporate obviously the conditions between all three parties, and at the site, because it's special scientific interest, must be managed in accordance to a specific site management plan. So if it wasn't us, it would be someone else, again post LGR, that would have to manage the site in the same way as we would, you know, if we continue to manage the site. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
yes. So I suppose I'm more wondering at the conclusion of the lease in 2087, what the reasonable expectation is now around natural next steps. Forgive me, given the nature of the land, as you say, as an SSI.
hopefully I'm still around in 2087, but my reasonable expectation would be that the negotiation of a new lease, whether it's us or whether it's whoever takes over in LGR or beyond that, obviously renegotiates for the benefit of the wildlife and the use of it by local residents and, you know, people further afield.
I think that's as helpful as you can be, given the time range, as you say. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just sat here calculating. I possibly won't be here by that stage, but I'm glad that there will be some people around this table who still will. But what a fantastic legacy to leave for the community if we are minded to approve this evening. Does anybody else have any questions that they want to ask at this stage? Thank you very much, Greg and Kirsty. So we'll move into the debate. Councillors, is there anything that you'd like to comment on? Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm one of three local members, for now 3 local members who represent Paxton Pitch, and this has been a long time coming. It's taken longer than some of the local community had expected, but I'm really happy to have got there. The number of questions that come up at Little Paxton Parish Council every month is incredible, but it's a fantastic facility, and a facility that only exists because of HDC. So in 1985, it was established as part of, I think, our then Ouse Valley Recreation Local Plan. And it's an incredible asset to Little Paxton, but also, you know, it's going to connect Little Paxton and St Neots up with Diddington and Buckton now, and it's going to have even more use. And it's already a fantastic nature resource. It's also a fantastic community resource because alongside our fantastic rangers, there's lots of community volunteers there. And I just think it's incredible. I think the best thing for me about St Neots and Little Paxton is like the green corridor that runs along the centre of it. As part of the Ouse Valley Way, I've walked the whole of the Ouse Valley Way, and absolutely the best bit is the bit from St Neots up to God, Manchester, Huntingdon, St Ives is the best part of the whole thing, and this is a fantastic thing. So thank you very much for getting this across the line. I'm very grateful, and I'm sad they're going to have to share it with Councillor Hassel now, I think, as Digital member. So.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I think actually a lot of people won't necessarily have appreciated that link to the geography. It does link settlements, but in terms of that powerful sort of bringing people together and making those connections, it's really, really important. Are there any other comments before we then perhaps move to a vote? So, no other comments, which I'm hoping is favourable, but we'll see where you go with this. So on page 12, oh, sorry, I do apologise. Councillor Wakeford, I missed you.
No, so I suppose in terms of debate, the paper records discussion at scrutiny, and it sounds like there were a fair few questions, so just kick the tyres on the expectations around ongoing cost to the council. It sounds to me like those were fairly comprehensively answered to the satisfaction of scrutiny, so I certainly don't have any sort of outstanding questions on that as well. I don't know if others or officers wanted to comment, but the cost implications are set out in the paper, and I'm comfortable with them, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. That's really important because it is important that we pick up the overview and scrutiny. Greg, is there anything particularly you wanted to just come back on?
I think in terms of the financial constraints that Councillor Wakeford has mentioned, we're comfortable there based upon the report. It was just around the highway management. Obviously, it isn't as though we accept and execute the leases and then we expect tens of thousands more visitors. That will happen over time as we develop the site, hence the reason why we put the report forward. So we're comfortable that we would work with the County Council or the appropriate authorities in time to develop the site and ensure the highways are accessible for all and they're safe for all as well when visitors attend the site. So that was the only comment I wanted to make.
Thank you, Greg. In which case then, on page 12, we have 3 recommendations that Greg's already kindly reminded us of, but I'm just going to sort of draw your attention to them again. So to fully approve and give delegated authority to fully execute the leases for the land adjacent to the current nature reserve, allowing for an extension of Paxton Pits Nature Reserve for the completion of the gravel extraction operations and the agreed restoration works. The second one is to agree and approve the feedback from 3C Legal Shared Services outlined in section 10 of the report, which provides confidence and clarity to the council in moving forward with the extension of leases. And then the final one is to support the principle of officers engaging in efforts to acquire land and buildings in connection with the principle of exploring wider opportunities to not only develop existing sites across the council's parks and open spaces, but also new sites and spaces to support wildlife and conservation, health and well-being, physical activity and commercial sustainability opportunities. If you are content, can I propose those from the chair? Can I have a seconder? I probably should have asked Councillor Kerr. Would you like to propose them? Councillor Kerr will propose them. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray. Can I have a show of hands of those in favour, please? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to more updates in time. I won't be back here in 2087, I suspect, but what a fantastic legacy for our community, our children to come. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more photos of people thoroughly enjoying that space. And particularly the fact that it's a site of special scientific interest makes it particularly special. So thank you very much for all your hard work on it. Councillor Ferguson, you'll have some good news I hope to take back to the parish council. And I suspect Martin Hassel, a councillor for Buxton, will be equally enthused. Thank you very much. In which case, that moves us on then to our next item, which is the commercial investment strategy. So, Councillor Mickleborough, I believe this is you going to introduce this for us. Thank you.
Yes, although I managed to miss the presentation at overview and scrutiny as I was feeling unwell. So thank you for stepping in, Councillor Conboy. It's not the only thing that's thrown a spanner, actually, with the commercial investment strategy. So LGR has thrown us a little bit of a curveball, I think, with this one. We started the process before the announcement, but when the announcement arrived, we decided to continue because actually we made the decision when we first formed the administration that we would leave the commercial side of the finance side of things, the commercial investment strategy, as it was, because the market was tough and we had other financial imperatives that we needed to deal with. And a strategy or an investment strategy should be a longer term item. It shouldn't be something you stop and chop and change over the course of a couple of months just because a valuation goes up or down, or you're finding it difficult to find tenants for a property. So the aim this time round was to have a slightly more rounded view of what it was that we were trying to achieve. I think it's fair to say that the previous strategy was commercial property investment is the answer. Now, what is the question? And what we wanted to do was to be a little bit broader with that, but equally not to tie ourselves down to specific areas or items that we wanted to be investing in, and to try to take a more holistic view that says what are the things that are important when we look to make a investment. And those have been outlined in the document. We have, I think, stated clearly that an investment within the commercial investment strategy should be primarily an investment for return, for revenue, But what we've tried to do is to then factor in the other things that are important, the other things that link to the corporate plan, the other things that link to the way that we want to be dealing with the environmental side of things. So, for example, we wouldn't invest in a coal-fired power station, but equally we wouldn't invest in a solar farm if it wasn't making any money within the boundaries of the commercial investment strategy. So that then led to the presentation that happened at Overview and Scrutiny and some of the questions that came through from Overview and Scrutiny. Again, not being in the room, it's often a little bit difficult to pick up some of the context of some of these. However, I think the view generally was supportive of the document. There were a couple of questions around risk and the view that perhaps the commercial investment strategy ought to follow the same guidelines for risk across the rest of the organisation. There was a comment about significant reliance on the Section 151 officer. And I don't think we make that any more onerous in this iteration of what we are doing than was already present previously. But what you would look to do to mitigate that would be to put a good quality team with good colleagues who are able to take the majority of the actions and to leave the Section 151 officer to hold their key part within the process of the authorisation and then just the governance overview of the properties. Councillor Martin expressed concern that strategy will not achieve the objective of generating revenue as effectively as the previous iteration. I'm not quite sure that we can really respond with that one because we do not have the crystal ball to be able to look further forward. And I think what we have done, however, is given ourselves a broader scope rather than being constrained onto the commercial property side of things. And therefore, hopefully, it will be a case of different eggs in different baskets. And hopefully for this council or whatever our successors are, that would put us in a stronger position. So hopefully that covers everything that was within the document and within the Overview and Scrutiny. I don't know if anyone else wants to make any comments that come back from that or to have any questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mickleborough. And I was the one who, as you say, presented it for you. I missed you very much at that meeting. I'm glad we didn't have too many technical conversations, but that's a really good summary, obviously, of the discussion that we had. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Yeah, Councillor Sanderson?
Well, just a general one. As Councillor Mickleborough said, and it's picked up at 1.4, isn't it? We're not looking here to review the investment holdings, but obviously LGR is so many unknowns on there at the moment. Do we have any idea, though, when we might be able to do that, or are we just simply waiting for the data on LGR first?
So I think what you should always do is make decisions boundaried by your long-term strategy. So how would we have previously assessed whether or not we would review what we have at the moment, what we should be doing of that, what we might do next? And it certainly couldn't have come from the document that was produced previously because so much has changed in terms of COVID impacting commercial property, particularly retail, that to try to make any forward decision based on what we had previously, we just wouldn't have been able to make a decision. So now the aim will be, let's have a look at what we have in the context of what we have agreed is a sensible boundary. Now, for some of that, it may well be, actually, we've got really strong, we should move it forward. There may be other elements of, excuse me, our operational portfolio that we look at and we say, actually, we could do something with this, with some land, with some other properties around the wrapper of the commercial investment strategy. Or it might be that actually we've looked at these, the market's changed, and because we can do other things with the money within that investment, it is best to sell. All of those options for everything are open, but we've at least now given ourselves a framework to assess each of those properties and each of those options with a clear boundary for how we would make a decision.
Any more? Councillor Wakeford?
Thank you. I think this is a really strong piece of work. It's short and sharp, but I think it does what we need it to in no more words than it needs to. So this is a really helpful reference point. Obviously, there's a whole framework of decision making that would sit underneath it in terms of decisions to acquire particular assets and release them as well. I think it does enshrine commercial income as a critical part of the strategy, which is a clear part of our duties to keep the council funded. So I have had careful regard to, but struggled, I think, to understand some of the criticisms to the contrary from scrutiny, because it does retain that core objective in making sure that what we're doing is focused in Hunts as a district and allowing us to achieve secondary benefits as well beyond pure revenue generation. We're actually maximising the value that our district gets from our investment rather than other districts. Charming as others may be, this is our focus and responsibility. So I think it's actually an iterative improvement in the terms that the observations from scrutiny might recognise it. I mean, if anything, the criticism I was expecting was that this was so obviously sensible that it was the natural evolution of what predecessors had done anyway, because I think that the cross-party work that fed into development of the strategy was reasonably consensual as well as constructive. But I'm happy with moving forward on it, and I think the council can feel it's a responsible update to our CIS.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Kerr.
Just to keep it brief, I find it a very sensible strategy and a very prudent approach, and I can't see that there's any issues with it at all. I think it says what it is and it does what it needs to do.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. If there are no other comments then, we've got a recommendation before us. Let me just scroll back up to that part of the...
I suppose,
The
Chair, I
document
omitted to mention my wholesale agreement with the observation from the Chair of Scrutiny that we rely upon our Section 151 officer, because we certainly do. But I think that the reassurances about additional workload are helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. So the recommendation in the report is a very straightforward one. It simply says, sorry, I found it and then you moved the mouse too fast and I just wanted to read it back, is to approve the revised commercial investment strategy. See, I didn't really need to find that. I could probably have remembered that, couldn't I? Can I have a proposer? Councillor Mickleborough, seeing as I tried to steal Councillor Kerr's thunder earlier, I better not do it twice. So Councillor Mickleborough, second one is Councillor Wakeford. Can I have a show of those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And I do take the concerns. I think some of the comments, Councillor Sanderson, around local government reorganisation is people are very focused on trying to do what they believe is genuinely right for Huntingdonshire. So I think those comments are valid, and hopefully this new strategy will enable us to do that and do even more of it going forward. Let's move on then to the building energy strategy. Now, this was expected to be Councillor Howell presenting tonight, but unfortunately she's unwell, so it falls to me to introduce and present the report. I do have officers on hand if you want to ask anything too technically complicated, because Matt may need to come to my aid, but let's just see how we go. So the building energy strategy you've got before you as a paper. It details and leads on from the work that we've already committed to on achieving the net zero carbon emissions by 2040. And it links back to the climate strategy that we had already adopted in 2023. And I'm very pleased that we have Councillor Davenport-Ray with us this evening, who I know will make sure that we look at this through all of the right lenses. So we've taken a proactive approach so far to reducing carbon emissions within our buildings and moving to a renewable green electricity tariff, as well as completing a number of projects that reduce carbon and reduce the running costs by utilising external funding, including SAILAC's recycling scheme, the public sector decarbonisation, the low carbon skills fund and Sports England, all of which we very much appreciate. We've had the opportunity to use HCC's own resources, and there are a number of examples listed in the paper. The data shows that between 2019-20 and 2024-25, we'd achieved a market-based carbon reduction of 34.1% in building-related emissions, which is not to be sniffed at. That's a considerable achievement. Which leaves 1,678 tonnes of carbon CO2 still to be eliminated to reach net zero carbon. So we still have a journey to go on. To support this goal, we want to introduce a building energy strategy. So this will be new to the council. It's not been done before, but it fits very comfortably with how we think about protecting our future for our residents and how we make our contribution towards net zero. So this strategy aims to enhance the energy efficiency of council buildings, to reduce emissions and to identify opportunities for renewable energy installations, thereby delivering environmental and financial benefits. And I would just remind you, it is that dual outcome. So we're trying to hit the sweet spot between doing all the things that we genuinely believe we want to do and need to do in the environmental field, but remembering that some of those also bring financial benefits to the council and therefore to our taxpayers. So you have a report before you. I'm happy to take comments and questions in just a moment, but I will just draw your attention to some of the overview and scrutiny comments. I'm going to sort of paraphrase them because they are set out from page 51 in your document. But there was a discussion around green tariffs and how we might look to make sure that we are taking advantage of those. I think there is a real desire amongst our councillors to make sure that when we're looking at those options, we're looking at them and taking every opportunity in front of us. But those are operational decisions. And there was a long discussion about the energy efficiency of this particular building that we're sat within, because it is of its time. We are very fortunate that if you work in this building, it is a light-filled building, but that does then cause us some challenges under the current way that we are trying to make our buildings energy efficient, because we have rather a lot of glass. So we have to accommodate that in our planning and our thinking. But there certainly was a very engaged debate amongst our overview and scrutiny panel, and it's really nice to see them getting really engaged in things that they would like us to be considering going forward. So you have some recommendations in the paper, but I'm going to pause there. I'm going to open it up for questions and comment, and if there's anything too technical, Matt has assured me he will come to my rescue. I'm going to open it up to you. Who'd like to speak on this? No, everybody's got Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I actually wanted to say a thank you to the two officers who I know have been working on this for quite a while, to Matt and Carrie. One of the mantras that's included in our corporate plan is about do, enable, and influence. And the document that's before us today is about the do. But I have also been in a position to observe those two officers enabling and influencing on the same topic. Through community buildings that are trying to accomplish some of the same things we have here, being able to use their knowledge has really been invaluable. So I would say thanks to them for this work, but also for thinking outside the box and how they can implement this.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray, and quite right, the credit to our officer team, to Matt and to Kerry. And just a reminder, it's a very useful reminder. We said when we set out that a lot of the things we were doing are showing actually that we can do it, and therefore it encourages others to do the same. So thank you for that really helpful reminder and prompt. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, just a quick one. It was handled really well in overview and scrutiny. I sat and watched it. There was one of the ONS members were concerned that they were going to spend money for the sake of changing the gas boilers or whatever, just for the sake of it. And actually, the officers handled it really well, because it's going to be looked holistically, where as things have come to the end of their life, they will move into that building where massive changes are going to go on, like could be in one of their one leisure facilities. It will be considered then. So it was handled really well, and I'm very confident that no money is going to be wasted, but we will still be achieving our targets.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kerr. That was really helpful. Any other comments? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I agree. This is a really strong piece of work, and grateful for all the effort that's brought it here this evening. I won't repeat what colleagues have said. I suppose I was reflecting on the discussion that it appears scrutiny had around different definitions of green when it comes to energy tariffs and sort of competing interpretations of that as well. And we've discussed that in various fora previously, quite possibly in Cabinet with respect to decisions earlier in our administration. I think there's definitely, my sense as I suppose a lay observer rather than technical expert is that the jury is out in terms of some of the claims to greenery made when energy is being generated as it would otherwise, but you're just differently labelling which bits of the generation are green. So I certainly agree with the concern that scrutiny were raising, which I think it is right and proper that we bear in mind as part of our decisions around selecting energy tariffs when we are aiming for them to be green. I think the specific language of the additional recommendation made calls on us, among other things, to sort of take a formal council view on the debates I've alluded to, which I think my view is we're probably not competent to do quite simply. But I do think we should have regard to the work done by others in that space in making our procurement decisions. So my inclination would be to politely decline the specific language we have had suggested to us by scrutiny, but to, I suppose, echo the underlying point that we need, and I'm seeing nods from the top end of the table, from officer colleagues as well, that we do bear that in mind as we're making decisions, which I have every confidence we will do.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I'm going to partly disagree with Councillor Wakeford and partly agree. So it's clear that in ONS there was concern across the chamber about the idea of green energy tariffs. And I know this is something that our officers have been thinking about a lot, speaking to different procurement options, preparing in advance for when the procurement does come up. And in a lot of ways, some of the words in the recommendation from ONS are very operational and have to do with procurement and decisions that would be made in procurement. But I think there are some of the words that they've suggested that we should consider as an additional recommendation. And if I think back to our climate strategy and the development of that document, if I could go back in time, I probably would have added some of these words into that document as part of the climate strategy. So I have a proposed recommendation 3, which I will speak out, but then I'll pass it around so that you have it written down as well. To approve that consideration be given to the relative merits of a variety of different green energy tariffs, given that the expression 100% green energy is interpreted differently by different people when the council's energy tariff is next procured. There are issues of timing, especially when these processes happen. So we know when we go out to procure, we'll probably have about 48 hours of us being quoted what the options are to us. And so the officers need to have a lot of freedom given them to interpret that, to understand what our guidance is, and then to make a quick decision. So although this is an operational area, I don't think we have any council documents that have set out our intention. And I think this could be a way of doing that. So that would be recommendation number 3. I also have a view that recommendation number 2, as it stands, is something that we do as a matter of course that happens with any spending decision. And I don't think it needs to be explicitly stated here. So at the moment, it's to delegate to our Section 151 officer in consultation with the relevant cabinet member to make any budget amendments and to deliver projects. That's something we would always do, whether they were energy reduction projects or not. So I don't believe that recommendation is necessary. And on recommendation 1, so I'm going to go through all of them. I believe it needs to have a conjunction in the middle. So to approve the building energy strategy with a view to complete feasibility studies on the buildings identified and allow HDC to make informed decisions on future energy and carbon savings. I think there are a few little tweaks there that iron some of this out in a way that makes it helpful and enables our officers to move forward with speed when they need to, but understanding our views.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray. I'm going to ask if we can adjourn just for a moment, because I'd quite like to ask advice of officers, only because I wasn't aware we were probably going to table these, and I just want to just check that my understanding of any of those amendments, what that means in terms of operational for our officers. So if you'll bear with me, Chief Exec, Michelle. So that we can all So welcome back, those of you who are watching us online, either live or watching on playback. We've now had a chance to have a photocopied version of the tabled amendments that Councillor Davenport-Ray very kindly provided. So we've all now had a chance to read those. I'm going to then open up the conversation because clearly I suspect there will be a number of technical questions about process, just to make sure that we're all very clear about what's in front of us, so that we can then give each of those consideration. I suggest we do those one at a time because otherwise it's going to get very messy if we take them en bloc. So let me just read back the new proposed recommendation 1, and then I suggest we discuss it. And then recommendation 2 and then recommendation 3. But just before I do that, was there anything else in general debate before we move on to look at these specifically? Nothing else anybody wanted to say before we look at those? Okay. Okay, then. So recommendation 1, the new proposed wording, which differs from the wording that you will find on page 50 of your report, says to approve the building energy strategy with a view to complete feasibility studies on the buildings identified and allow HDC to make informed decisions on future strategy and carbon savings. Just checking with Councillor Davenport-Ray, have I got that correct? Because there's some extra markers. I just want to check that I've got that correct before we inadvertently debate something which is not what you thought we were going to.
To make informed decisions on future energy and carbon savings.
I'm going to then open it to questions and debates. If you've got a question about process or anything like that, now's the time to ask. So, Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. So this is a nuance of grammar, but I think having read the paper and reflected on what the recommendation does intend to mean, picked up by the covering report as well, I think I read this as a helpful clarificatory amendment. So the recommendation is approve the strategy with a view to completing feasibility studies on the buildings identified. So we do want to be completing feasibility studies on the building identified. We also want to be making informed decisions on future energy and carbon savings, but the purpose of the feasibility studies includes, but is not exclusively, making energy and carbon savings, not least that it's about considering energy and carbon use in the round. So those are different points. So at risk of labouring this, I think Councillor Davenport-Ray's very minor adjustment is helpful for avoidance of doubt. I suppose I'd look to colleagues around the table or indeed officers if they've got any observations on it, but I'll hold off making a proposal then.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. So just before I bring officers in, Councillor Davenport-Ray, can I just check that that's what you intended from it? Just because otherwise we'll go down a rabbit hole of interpretation, and I just want to be clear that's what you intend, and then we can take some advice from officers.
Yes, that was my intention.
Thank you. I could see Mike indicating to come in. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. It's exactly the point. It's the nuance so that the strategy can be used, A, for the feasibility studies that we want to do, but also then be used to inform any other decisions around future energy and carbon savings as indicated by the strategy, and the alternative, as Councillor Wakeford said. So it is just nuance of language.
In that... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, everybody's very excited on this one. Anita, can I bring you in before I bring Councillor Wakeford, if that's
yes,
okay?
thank you. Just a point of clarification on procedure. Now that we have had an amendment moved by Councillor Davenport-Ray, it requires a seconder.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford, I'm just going to bring you in because I don't know if that was a response to that or a question.
Well, no, I'm conscious procedurally it hasn't been seconded. I wonder if it is more helpful to make, in absence of it having been seconded, an alternative proposal, as it were, in part. Am I in order? No?
We'll take advice. We're certainly giving Anita something to think about this evening.
If the full proposal isn't seconded, then it falls and it's open to make a separate proposal. And I was going to make a proposal on recommendation 1 before we turn to what follows. But if I'm out of order, then please put me back in it.
Let's take advice from Anita, who's our monitoring officer. Anita.
Thank you. I kindly say I think we might be in danger of amending an amendment that's not been seconded. So if I could just ask, my advice to the chair is that you should seek a seconder on the amendment in the name of Councillor Davenport-Ray, and that will determine how we proceed.
Thank you. So we've got a proposal from Councillor Davenport-Ray. Do I have somebody willing to second? Councillor Ferguson.
I'm happy to second Councillor Davenport-Ray's proposal to proposed amendment.
Thank you. Right. So you've got a proposal for amended wording. Is there anything that you wish? Oh, right. So I now have Councillor Wakeford, and I may need to come back to Anita if I need extra advice. Councillor Wakeford.
Well, I think then I wish to propose we take it in parts, if that's in order. The effect, I think we've just, it strikes me that it would be helpful for us to consider the suggestions with respect to 3 recommendations separately, because I suspect they're, differently complicated. I wonder if we might seek guidance on the procedural approach to achieve that, if it's not to do this in parts.
Okay, we'll ask Anita to come back in. Thank you, Anita.
Okay, thank you. I note that we now have an amendment that has been moved and seconded. I am happy to take comments from my colleagues. However, I would be happy for what is on the table to be discussed. However, the Cabinet Committee needs to then take a decision whether or not to vote this through. Should the amendment be carried, that will become the substantive motion. If it is not, it will fall.
So, Cabinet colleagues. Good.
Well, then can I suggest you might wish to move to a vote in which I'd be minded to vote against, but then I'd be minded to invite Councillor Davenport-Ray to make a proposal in sequence on the 3 recommendations so that we're doing full justice to, I think, quite helpfully the points you wish to suggest. If others can see a more efficient procedural manner for us to discuss this separately, then so be it. Alternatively, Chair, if you prefer we tackle the whole thing in one go, then I can live with that.
So I'm just going to look down the table at Anita. Anita, do you just want to come in and just make sure we're all clear on procedure? Because it's really important, because otherwise we could find that we make a decision that actually is not procedurally correct.
Yes, thank you. I would advise that the Chair should move to the vote on the amendment, the first amendment put forward by Councillor Davenport-Ray, and we can deal with things separately, please. Thank you.
Okay, can I just ask a question of clarification, Anita? Because I don't know what's in Councillor Wakeford's mind. I don't know and there's laughter in the room. I don't know what his concerns are about that particular wording. And is there a mechanism by which I can legitimately ask him to explain why he would wish to abstain? Because that might help me understand. Or is that not appropriate? Forgive me, we don't do this very often where we get these amendments. And Councillor Davenport-Ray, you're keeping me on my toes tonight, which is good. So let me go to Anita, and then Councillor Davenport-Ray may wish to come in after that. Anita.
I'd advise that it's acceptable for Cabinet to discuss what has been put, which is the amendment. If the committee wishes to have a discussion in public around that, that is fine. You will then need to draw the debate to a close and take a vote. And as I say, the amendment will either be carried or it will fall.
Thank you. That's really helpful, because I think that's the debate is what I'd just quite like to hear, just to make sure if anybody's got any concerns or issues that we understand what they might be. I know Councillor Davenport-Ray's indicated, but can I come back to Councillor Wakeford specifically? Because I think if you are able to help us with the debate, that might explain why you've already indicated you may have a reticence.
Well, I suppose, may I check quite a basic question of procedure then? I have in front of me what looks like one amendment to the totality of the recommendations. Conscious our monitoring officer just made reference to a first amendment. Are we treating these as 3 separate amendments? Because if we are, then all of what I've just said is irrelevant.
You. No, that's really helpful. So I'm just going to look at the monitoring officer. I think I was proposing that we were looking at recommendation 1 on its own, that we've had a alternative wording proposed and seconded as a motion, and that we are simply looking at recommendation 1's wording only, and we're having a debate on recommendation 1. Are you suggesting that we might need that recommendation 1
No,
has
Chair.
Go on.
In that case, I've caught up with where colleagues were 5 minutes ago. In line with the comments that I made on the substance of recommendation 1, I agree entirely with the amendment Councillor Devonport is seeking to make with respect to recommendation 1. So if we have 3 amendments on the table, then that's
So we will
then
take
that's,
3
helpful.
individually. Thank
The
you.
parts I referenced was splitting the 1 amendment into 3, but it's already in 3.
Thank you. And Councillor Davenport-Ray?
Can I propose that we consider the amendment to recommendation 1, and then Cabinet votes on recommendation 1? Then we move to the vote deciding on, that my suggested changes to recommendation 2, and then we vote on recommendation 2. So we're making 3 decisions.
Thank you. I'm looking at Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Wakeford, did you have a question that
Well, I'm looking at officer colleagues. I think what the natural approach would be to have a vote on the amendment to recommendation 1, and then that stands, and then to move on to the amendment on 2 and on 3. I think it's only when we've concluded debate and we have finalised recommendations in front of us that we would wish to then be making a decision on the paper in front of us. That feels natural to me. I suspect it may even be the required approach to it, but we may have more flexibility than I'm allowing for.
Thank you. I'll just take advice.
To come in. I was going to say, if we come back to, thank you, Chair, if we come back to Anita, because we've got to remember that as an amendment is approved, it becomes a substantive motion, it becomes a substantive recommend. So then actually there's a sequencing. So Anita, the monitoring officer, would you like, sorry, Chair, if we go to the monitoring.
Yeah, thank you. So the first point that I would make is that at this point, there is 1 amendment to recommendation 1 on the table. So I would advise that you need to debate that to the point where you feel able to take a decision to vote on it. As the Chief Executive has said, if that carries, that will be the substantive motion. If it falls, obviously we revert to having recommendation 1 as set out in the report. Any subsequent amendments can come after that point, but I would say that they don't actually exist, so to speak, at this point, because they have not been formally proposed and seconded. So just to reiterate my advice, I propose that you move through the debate on the first amendment to the first recommendation, and then consider whether it's going to rise or whether it will carry or fall.
Right, thank you. Right, so you've got a change of wording that's been proposed and seconded as a motion. So we're going to vote on that wording, and then that if that is approved, that becomes our wording. If it falls and you don't approve it, then we go back to the original wording as set out on page 50, unless somebody else would like to have a second bite at the cherry and propose something different. So we've got a proposer and a seconder for the wording that we already have in front of us. So can we just clarify that? So it's recommendation 1. The new wording is to approve the building energy strategy with a view to complete feasibility studies on the buildings identified and allow HDC to make informed decisions on future energy and carbon savings. Nobody's told me I've got that wording wrong, so I believe that's correct. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you. So that's carried. So that is now our recommendation that replaces that is shown in the published paper on page 50. Okay, so I believe that there is then going to be a recommendation, a change potentially to recommendation 2. So Councillor Davenport-Ray, you, I think, had indicated that you may not consider that that's needed. Can I just check with the monitoring officer, because that's not a normal process in the sense of normally we would amend the wording. So can I just take some advice on that, please?
Yes, thank you. It would be helpful to have confirmation from Councillor Davenport-Ray in public session as to her intentions with regards to recommendation number 2. However, if, as I understand, it is to simply delete recommendation 2, my suggestion to the committee would be that recommendation 2 is put, the vote for all substantive motions can be taken, and that councillors would have the opportunity to vote for, against or abstain. I would consider that to be the most efficient and effective way.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I'm happy to follow the guidance of the monitoring officer on that and proceed with the vote on recommendation 2.
Okay, so just to clarify, because I think I've now lost the thread. So the recommendation 2 is as it stands in the paper. Okay, so I'm not going to vote on that at the moment. I'm then going to move on to the next amendment. So in other words, so just so the public have caught up with us. So recommendation 1 is the changed wording. Recommendation 2 is the wording that still exists in the original report on page 50. And then we have a proposed recommendation 3, which picks up the conversation from overview and scrutiny. And the new recommendation, the proposal for it is, the wording says, to approve that consideration be given to the relative merits of a variety of different green energy tariffs, given that the expression 100% green energy is interpreted differently by different people when the council's energy tariff is next procured. Have I got that correct? No. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, I would like to propose that amendment to recommendation 3.
Thank you.
As you have read it out. Yeah.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Ferguson? Thank you. So that's the proposal. I'm looking at the monitoring officer. Because this is new, are we able to debate this and ask for questions, or is that not the appropriate moment to do so?
Yes, that is acceptable.
Thank you. So I just want to check that this sits comfortably alongside the overview and scrutiny's recommendation. So I'm going to open this up to debate for councillors to be able to comment before I then ask you to consider the new wording. Councillor Mickleborough.
I assume I am opening the debate then. Please. I'm glad I've kept up. Good. I'm slightly confused by this, and as the person who'd be ending up doing the procurement piece, that's probably not a good place to be. So the recommendation doesn't help boundary what 100% green energy interpretation is. And there is no doubt that people have different interpretations of it. So let me explain very quickly what I would see this as. So our energy market is slightly bonkers. You are simplistically and paraphrased, the day is broken down into half-hour boundaries, and the most expensive form of power arriving in the grid is what you are bound or paying the rate of power consumption, or what it is that you're purchasing for your power at that point in time. And sometimes that can be when there's lots of green energy around, it's the middle of summer and the wind's blowing and the sun's out and the birds are singing, that can be almost entirely green, and the price can be really, really low, 2 or 3 pence per kilowatt hour of electricity. In the middle of winter, when it's completely the opposite, it's all dark, it's all the wind isn't blowing, there is no sunshine, and we're firing up gas power stations and so on. The cost of electricity can be 60 or 70 pence a kilowatt hour because the market is slightly mad. And despite what you will hear in the press, green energy is an awful lot cheaper. But the problem is we can't store it effectively at the moment, and therefore we have this variation. And what will end up happening is that the different types of green energy tariff are tied to the fact that at certain points in time you cannot buy enough green power unless you own the generation and the supply, which is how I would see a proper green tariff. The difficulty is not very many of those exist, and they definitely were not coming out on our frameworks, the procurement frameworks that we were looking at in either of the last two times. We've had to go for the version which is more of a, I will attempt to buy, and if I have to buy something else, I will sort of make up for it with a sort of green carbon credit type payment later on. And so that in essence gives me the three types of supplier I'll be looking at. A proper green who owns the vertical supply chain and therefore are able to do these things. Somebody else who won't, who will find themselves at certain points in time having to buy credits to do so elsewhere. Or a third type of supplier who won't try to pretend at all whatsoever and will just buy whatever is available to them on the market to meet the demand that's coming from their customers. So that's how I put our three suppliers. As I look at the recommendation, I'm always going to try to go for the first, as in the vertically, because that's how I've tried to line up everything that I'm doing. And I think as a council, that's where we should be, in a thought leadership, leading by example point of view. But if our frameworks that we are having to buy within do not offer that, the only other option we have is the sort of green tariffs. And if we're looking at that, and then I'm looking at that, the interpretation of 100% green energy is different by different people. I know that there's going to be lots of differences in there, but when I make the procurement decision, I don't get any help from the statement. All I can come back to is what I think we should be doing, and I think what Overview and Scrutiny are trying to say is we should be doing better than that, but I haven't got a framework to do better than that within this amendment, even if I can be guided by the way I would behave. So I'm sort of, I find myself wondering why we would have this amendment, and I'd look to have something a little bit more structured that would actually give me the guidance as an amendment instead.
Thank you, Councillor Mickleborough. Can I just ask you a technical question that you might not be able to answer, but I might need help from officers? You talked about frameworks. Is that the procurement frameworks that we currently have available? And I'm assuming that we are limited within those. In other words, that's part of our structure, and we can't just, they're government procurement frameworks, I think, aren't they? Can I just be really clear about that? In other words, they're not something we can pull things in and out. There's a whole process that has to happen in terms of to be on a framework in order for us then to procure from it.
So we used ESPO last time, and Suzanne is probably going to be better picked to answer that. But in essence, it means that if you do a procurement exercise, you need to know that you're buying off someone who's not going to go bust, who's trusted, who has the right pieces in place, who you've got the signed contracts and all of those sorts of service agreement style elements there. If you do that through a government framework, all of those things are being done in advance for you. And in essence, you turn up at the table and say, here is the menu I can read from. And I know that I can buy from these, and I know that I'm not going to suffer the problems. I don't need to go credit checks and all of those sorts of things. If you're a person, you're residential, you may then just, I don't know, you may do a Google search and you may end up with, here are all your potential energy suppliers, and you've got to do the due diligence. Now, when it's your own electricity bill, you've got a little bit of cover from the regulator. If you're spending taxpayers' money, actually, I'm not happy. Our electricity bill was, I don't know, what, £3.5 million, something like that last year. I'm not comfortable signing that over to somebody who goes bust and runs off with our money. Therefore, those government frameworks put assurance around that transaction for us.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
So the purpose of the amendment is to encourage a certain timeline to happen. We know when our tariff is going to end. We use that period of time to be signed up and engaged with even more procurement frameworks that do have better offerings than the ones we're currently engaged with, or by that point, the current procurement frameworks we're working with may have developed new options as well. But that when we get to that very short period of time, which might be 48 hours, that officers know that politically we would expect all of those options to have been explored and just and compared against the financial implications of all those options, like we talked about before. So there's going to be the greenest, and there's going to be the most expensive, and we're going to compare those things to find the right fit for our council. But in the time leading up to that very short decision period, we want to make sure we have everything in place so that we can tender in all the right places that do have the safety measures you're talking about in procurement frameworks that perhaps we were not members of when this decision was last made.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. That's really helpful to understand the intent. Can I just ask officers, and I think this might be a Suzanne question, but I'm not sure. Councillor Davenport Ray's indicated about a range of frameworks. Do we have multiple frameworks that we could look at that we do not currently access? I think in my mind, I just want to be clear about what choices we might have, because I don't know how broad, are there many, or is it just one? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We have access to a range of frameworks. We have Crown Commercial Service, we have ESPO, we have other providers who've set up frameworks. We can access any of those, provided that they're already there and we can choose to go in or out of one. The procurement team, supported by the service, which is Matt Raby, look at those constantly. So actually, we're not bound simply to go down one route. And as Councillor Mickelberg said, ultimately we could do it all ourselves, but that's actually a bigger job and a higher risk approach. So it would be our intent to look for some existing frameworks, but we're not limited to just any one. So I hope that's helpful.
And can I ask another point of clarification then? Would we normally look at all of those frameworks? In other words, is that a normal internal operational process, or is it the sort of thing that we need to enshrine in a strategy because we wouldn't normally do it? I'm trying to get my head around. I can understand Councillor Davenport's desire to be really explicit about our intent as a council, but I'm trying to square that off with strategic intent and operational practicalities.
Certainly, when procurements are brought on board through the procurement board, which is an officer board, we actually look at strategy. It would be our normal approach to look at frameworks first to see if they give us what we need for all the reasons that were articulated earlier, all the hard work in terms of assessing the companies that are signed up to that framework have already been done. So that would be our normal approach. In the event that there isn't a framework set up, or we particularly wanted to go to the market in a different way, we would do that. So it's not unique to this procurement, it's our whole approach to procurement and is enshrined in the way we deliver our procurements across everything that we do.
And then if I can have one more go, please, just because, again, I just want to be really precise. So Councillor Davenport Ray, in a minute, then you can come back and check whether I've got the interpretation correct. I think he's looking with this amendment to make sure that when we do that process, we are referring back to both this strategy and I suspect the climate strategy. Operationally, do I need to put that in a document to ensure that future administrations continue to work in that way? Because I think for me that is something that I think I would consider quite important at this stage in a term of the administration. It's that making sure that the operational processes line up with the strategic intent. And forgive me, do I need to put that somewhere in order to make sure that that is explicit, or would that automatically happen? Sorry, I don't know if you can even answer that question.
Officers will always work within the strategies that any administration and council have approved. So that you referenced earlier the climate strategy, and this building energy strategy pay reference to the fact that we would want to go with what's within our corporate plan and other associated policies, whereby there is that agreed intent by the council that you will adopt those approaches. So I believe it's already enshrined in those other policies and would be the way in which officers would approach it. So until any of those strategies were changed and everything was taken out of that nature, we would still work within those strategies and the corporate plan.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring the Chief Exec in. Michelle?
Thank you, Chair. May I also make the point that as officers, we have a duty to ensure that decisions that are implemented are in accordance with the best value legislation. So actually, that is an overriding legislative. So whoever might be a future administration, we still have statutory responsibilities as officers around value for money, acting lawfully in terms of how we procure in line with legislative frameworks and those wider governance aspects as well. So again, as we've talked before around governance, it's not always a binary. It is a range of considerations that must be brought into play, ultimately to ensure that we're securing value for money in accordance with that overriding duty.
Thank you. That's really helpful clarification. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I think the way you summarized it a minute ago was my intention. I have faith that the officers are already starting to do this type of work, and I already have a plan of when we get to that tariff renewal. I have no doubts about that. But I don't feel that this topic was explicitly covered either in the climate strategy or in the document, the substantive document that we are approving this evening. So that was my intention, but yeah.
Apologies, may I come in? We're not talking about the climate strategy, so we can't remedy whatever you feel wasn't explicit in a policy, a strategy that's already been agreed by cabinet, by council, because again, council agrees strategy. So we just need to be mindful that we are looking at the issue that faces you today and not seek to remedy other shortcomings that you now, on reflection, feel as a body could have been dealt with differently, because we're straying out of the purpose of what the report is and into other areas that you might not be the correct decision maker for. So I just need to make that point really clearly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, because we don't want to get ourselves in a mess with a challenge. So, Councillor Davenport-Ray, just before I bring you in, so we are specifically focused on the building energy strategy. So before you answer, I suppose what's going through my mind is, does the building energy strategy, which is before us for decision tonight, is that explicit enough, or does it require this recommended change?
The building energy strategy before us is adding detail to ideas that we set out in our climate strategy. So we're being asked to approve a new strategy, and I think that this explicit point is not made in the strategy we're being asked to vote on tonight.
Thank you. That's really helpful clarification. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. So I think that we share an aspiration, at least as a minimum, that the council procures as green energy as possible, in light of the trade-offs that we're well familiar with and in line with our climate strategy. The strategy in front of us, which is the one that we're discussing, underlines that we do need to procure green energy where possible. I think further to my earlier observations about the scrutiny discussion and amendment, I certainly recognise, I think we've all recognised previously, that there are debates around how green is green and definitions. As I mentioned earlier, I'm conscious that we're not competent to sort of adjudicate in that space. So I am, like Councillor Mickelberg, unclear that the additional wording suggested to us, particularly removing the most problematic but specific elements from scrutiny's original recommendation, actually takes us much further down that line. I don't think we need this in order to be procuring as green energy as possible. I think officers are clear about our intended direction of travel that we have set. It would be helpful if there were clear definitions, benchmarks externally that we could rely upon and procure according to. I don't think we're quite in that space yet. So I think this is I see this as constructively intentioned, but my feeling is that this isn't necessary and doesn't add value. So as I said, I concur with the fuller comments Councillor Mickelberg made on this one. But I think we're all agreeing that we want to be procuring green energy for our buildings arising from the strategy before us.
Thank you. Any more comments? In which case, we've got a proposal for, let me just check I've got that right. So can I just check? Councillor Davenport Ray, because we've done 3 and that I've forgotten. Have you proposed this? And if not, could you please do that just so that we've got that for the record?
I have proposed an additional recommendation 3, which is the text that you have previously read out.
Thank you. And Councillor Ferguson, I think you've seconded it, but can you just for the record confirm?
Yes.
Right. So if there are no other comments, then can we move to a vote on that motion? So we are deciding whether we are happy to accept the new recommendation that has been put forward so that we can then decide if we're going to accept it in the long run. So in other words, we've got new wording before us. Are we happy to accept that new wording for recommendation 3? And I'm just going to look at the monitoring officer. If this passes, we can then move to looking at all 3 recommendations. If this fails, and there are 2 options, either somebody's got to propose an alternative wording if they still want a 3rd recommendation, or there is no 3rd recommendation. Anita, is that correct?
That is correct, yes. When the committee is at the point where it is able to vote on the substantive motions, however many that might be, I would suggest, Chair, that you would want to take those one at a time, and please let me know if you'd like me to support you in talking that through.
Thank you. Right, so this is for a new recommendation 3, the wording of which we have been given. So you are voting as to whether you are happy to accept this worded recommendation 3 before we then move to adding it or not adding it to our wider decision making. Can I have a show of those in favour of recommendation 3? So the amendment for recommendation 3. Okay, so I've got 3 in favour. Can I have a show of those against? 4 against. And so therefore the amendment falls. That's everybody's voted, yes? So the amendment falls. Sorry, that's an abstention, sorry, from Councillor Mickleborough. So can I just check my numbers again? Anita, can you just confirm the decision?
Thank you. I have noted that the number of people who voted for the amendment was 3. Against was 4 votes. There was 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment in the name of Councillor Davenport Ray has fallen.
Thank you, Anita. Can I just check before we move any further that there are no further things that you wish us to consider? I'm not overly inviting that, but I just want to check before we move any further. Anita's looking at me and I kind of don't. Right, because I just want to make sure. So then we are moving to the final decision. So we have 2 recommendations to consider. The first is the new wording for recommendation 1. And I'm going to move that to a vote, and then we will take recommendation 2, which is as exists in the paper. Those are the only 2 recommendations before us. Councillor Wakeford.
Forgive me, Chair, but procedurally, are we content that we could still entertain debate about recommendation 2 before voting if we followed the course of action you've just outlined? My assumption was we probably couldn't, that we'd need to have the discussion now and then our voting could be done in sequence, but would be done all at once at the end. But that may be excessive caution on my part.
Right, so I'm going to look at Anita because now you've lost me, Councillor Wakeford, but I think Anita's been following.
I think so, although I'm not entirely clear, forgive me, of the exact question that Councillor Wakeford is asking. We are in a position now where, unless any further amendments or motions are put forward, we have substantive motions for recommendation 1 and recommendation 2 to be moved as set out in the report, unless the committee decides otherwise. I would say it is a matter for the chair to consider if debate has been should draw to a close. I will leave that at your discretion, and when you are content to draw debate to a close, at that point we would move to the vote on the final 2 substantive motions.
So, Councillor Wakeford, do we need further debate?
Well, just as I thought I'd understood from Councillor Davenport Ray earlier that she did wish to be encouraging us to consider voting against the second, while voting in favour of the first. I'm conscious we haven't had a discussion around the table about that element yet. I was anticipating we might wish to, so forgive me if I wasn't clear. But to our monitoring officer, my concern was that if we proceed in starting to vote on the first recommendation that we might then be precluding ourselves from engaging in that discussion I thought we might still wish to have on the second. However, I have no need for discussion if no one is going to suggest that we separate them off and vote the second one down, because I'm quite happy with what is on the table on both recommendations to approve and move to the next item.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. Michelle?
So if I can assist and take you back, because we have been on this item for some time, if I can take you back to the monitoring officer's advice, because there was no suggestion to amend recommendation 2, it is a straight, is it approved, is it not? That is why you haven't debated an amendment. So you actually haven't discussed recommendation 2, because it's a straight yes or no. So just for clarity as to why you've done recommendation 1 and 3, the suggested recommendation 3 that's fallen, that is why, just for clarity and for those who may be watching.
Okay. So I don't believe that we are being asked if we wish to debate recommendation 2. Can anybody indicate if there is an absolute desire for a debate on recommendation 2? Because if not, then I'm going to move through the voting process. Okay. Right. Thank you. Let's move to recommendation 1 then, which is the amendment that we've agreed. So I'm just going to read that. So recommendation 1 that you are going to vote on is to approve the building energy strategy with a view to complete feasibility studies on the buildings identified and allow HTC to make informed decisions on future energy and carbon savings. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, just for clarity, just to make sure I'm belt and braces? So the proposer, Councillor Davenport-Ray, the seconder, Councillor Ferguson. Can I have a show of hands of those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And then recommendation 2 is the original wording as set out in page 50 of your report, to delegate to the Corporate Director, Finance and Resources, S151, in consultation with the Executive Councillor for Finance and Resources, to make any consequential amendments to budgets and release of the necessary funds to deliver the projects. Can I have a proposer? I'll propose it then from the chair, seeing as I presented it for Councillor Howell. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Wakeford, was that you indicating? Can I have a show of those in favour, please? And those against? And any abstentions? Okay, and so that is carried. Thank you very much. That concludes that item. Thank you. That was very complicated, but we got there. For those of you who've stayed with us online, well done. I'm hoping that we don't have quite so many technical aspects to the following ones. And Matt and Kerry, thank you very much for your hard work on this item. I would suspect you are very glad at this point that you were not having to do the same job as Anita. Anita, thank you very much for walking us through that, and Michelle as well for making sure the governance has been robust. Thank you. And breathe. Item 6, corporate performance report. So I believe this is Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. So this is always an odd performance report, because we're reviewing the performance in Q1, which finished almost 3 months ago. We're nearly at the end. We're 2 weeks away from the end of Q2. So we have to cast our minds back since before our summer holidays to discuss how we're performing then. In terms of positive performance, was really pleased to see that PI3 and PI4, which to do with the provision of disability facility grants, are both significantly outperforming the Q1 performances for the past 2 years. PI3 is green, PI4 is amber, which is, we've been talking about this every single time I've made this report. It's a big concern. We're not out of the woods yet, because I think the outturn predictions for both those is amber, but I think, if we can carry on pushing in the right direction. So thank you to the working group and to all officers who I know have been pushing hard on this, and with our relationship with Places for People, which has been an issue in the past. So glad to see that happening and moving in the right direction. I think in terms of kind of more worrying aspects of this report, I think there's a common theme based around PI11, which is a number of affordable houses delivered. So, in the last year or so, we congratulate ourselves in delivering a record number of affordable houses, and we realised that wasn't necessarily sustainable, and that number has dipped now into the red. And a consequence of that, a direct consequence of that, is that two really important measures, which are PI7, which is number of homelessness as we prevented, and PI8, number of households housed through HomeLink, both dipped into the red during Q1. And the reason for that, quite simply, is that those measures, despite the fantastic work that officers do, and as much as we try, if we don't have affordable housing coming through, then we don't have a way of moving people out of temporary accommodation. It's kind of a pipeline thing. So that was a concern to me. It's not something that we can directly influence, I think, but in terms of our do enable influence mantra, I'd note that corporate plan objectives 14, 20, 21, 24 and 27 talk about prevention of homelessness and influencing the delivery of affordable housing. And I think that we need to do whatever we can to make sure that we keep that pipeline going, because the consequences that we've seen already from PI7 and PI8, which are two critical measures, I think, for me, especially as a portfolio holder, are significant. So it's definitely something that we need to keep our eye on. I think every time I've reported this, I've always said that our good performance with regard to homelessness was always vulnerable to this measure, and having seen it dip a bit in Q1, I think another concern with PI11 is not only that we've dipped at the start of the year, is I think that 70% of our affordable housing is supposed to be delivered in Q4, which makes us very vulnerable to overruns. So whatever we can do as a cabinet, as a council, to try and influence our colleagues and friends in the housing development sector to keep up with their delivery of affordable houses, I think it would be very valuable for us. I think that's all I need to say about that. Other than reports that we had a long discussion about all of these measures at ONS. There was some. I need to go back and find my notes. Excuse me a second. There was lots of questions about things not to do with the report, which I tried my best to answer, but might be better answered by the portfolio holders. There were some questions about our street cleansing performance. We do an assessment of the street scene, and I think unusually in this quarter we got 100%. And I think some members observed that despite the fact we worked hard in keeping, streets clear, clean litter and graffiti, observation are only in our local towns often shows that it's never quite 100%. And so I think there were some questions really on methodology. So we're going to ask officers to come back and talk about the methodology. There was also some questions about there's a backlog in us giving council tax banding to new properties, which isn't our fault. It's because the Valuation Office has changed its software systems and there's a big backlog there. So there were some concerns from our ONS members that might result in a decline in revenue or people not getting council tax bills. And I was able to reassure them that I think that the Revs and Ben's team are able to give estimated council tax bandings, but there was some concern that, that maybe in the future, if people's council tax bandings were changing, it might cause undue financial stress. But I think I was able to reassure members of the committee there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. As always, I reflect the openness and the sort of very frank way in which we share these reports. That's not something we traditionally did as a council, and I really, really welcome it. Thank you, including the real challenges in front of us, some of which we have considerable control over and some of which we really don't have as much control as probably we would naturally comfortably wish to have. Are there any comments or questions? Because this is a report for discussion. Councillor Sanderson.
I think Councillor Ferguson's been a little bit too modest, actually, because I picked up disabled facilities grants, something we've been working on for a long time, and that's actually in a far better place, isn't it? A lot of people are very dependent on that. I think we were worried that perhaps we needed to look at the system, we needed to improve it. So clearly something has gone right there. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. I also echo that sentiment. So, Councillor Ferguson, thank you to you, the colleagues that are working hard on it. It really is incredibly welcome. Any other comments or questions? I know it's been a long evening so far. Also, Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Sanderson. I think Councillor Ferguson handled this with some fortitude from the breadth of questions he had thrown at him. I just thought I would comment upon PI 11, not least as it's within my portfolio area that Councillor Ferguson spoke to around our affordable housing delivery numbers, really just to underline the commitment of our administration on this one. From the figures that we have, as we've noted previously, Councillor Ferguson is absolutely right. We've been proud about our affordable housing delivery. I think we are rightly proud of it. The first 3 years of our administration, so to date, and not even counting houses we've had delivered in this municipal year, we already delivered more than in any 4-year period since we'd been recording these figures. So we could have delivered not a single house this year. We'd have had record numbers across our administration. But the objective is not merely to do better than the council's managed before. It's to try to make meaningful inroads into the need, which is enormous and ever growing. So I think we have a record we can be pleased with, but there is always more to do. The market does move in if not waves, pendulum swings, to mix my metaphors, in different directions. We had a particular bumper year last year, not least bringing forward housing that might otherwise have come in this year, so the figures do look lower this year. In terms of what we can do about this, of course, I'd just underline that awareness of this and the ongoing need to be finding ever more effective ways of delivering housing for its own sake, as well as to tackle our other objectives, as Councillor Ferguson quite rightly described, where there are knock-on impacts, is exactly why we've been working hard in parallel to our business as usual work to explore further collaborations, as we decided, Cabinet last but one, as well to move forward with a particular partnership. And I think we made a fairly brave decision on that one in light of some of the questions asked of us previously, but I think we tackled them and we recognise this was a really important challenge for the reason Councillor Ferguson said, and we moved forward anyway, and we're progressing with that work. So a very, if you'll forgive me, roundabout way of saying, Chair, that I agree with Councillor Ferguson, and we are indeed redoubling our efforts on affordable housing.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford, which is entirely why we do this performance reporting, and we share it so openly, because actually it genuinely does focus our intent and our energy. And equally, I know that sometimes we are challenged by our colleagues that if it's green, it's because we set ourselves some very easy targets. None of our targets are easy for us or our officers. And they do require considerable energy to keep them in green or amber. But equally, when they do tip over into red, we take it incredibly seriously. And as you say, we redouble our efforts. So thank you for that. That's really helpful. Any other comments? In which case then, Councillor Ferguson, can I thank you very much? I'm just going to go to the formal bit. That means I've just got to say the Cabinet was invited to consider and comment on the progress and performance during Q1 as set out in the report. But Councillor Ferguson, can I thank you, but importantly, can you pass our thanks back to officers, not just those who produce these really detailed reports, but to the whole team. And perhaps, Michelle, could you take that back too, because it really genuinely does drive the work that we do and does give us the clarity about how on target we are with our corporate priorities. And I think, as I said before, we are really transparent about that. And I think that's really helpful for us and hopefully for the public. So if you're watching at home and you haven't looked at that report and the red, green, amber, please do so, because it really is heartening to see where we are doing well, but should give you assurance that we're on it where it's dipping, and we can take some actions. Moving us forward then onto the finance report. It's getting a little bit late in the day, but I'm going to hand across to Councillor Mickleborough. It's really important we do this report justice. Councillor Mickleborough.
Again, this is another one that feels slightly strange because we're almost at Q2 reporting points, but such is the municipal calendar. It's really uneventful. It's really dull and boring. Almost everything is where it ought to be, really. There's a few ups and downs in terms of expenditure due to some accounting principles. So, for example, you can't capitalise something until you've actually turned it into a project properly. So we've had some expenditure that's actually booked to revenue until it can be turned into capital. We've got some expenditure around LGR that was money set aside from last year rather than this year, but that's therefore always going to create us a slight budget tilt, but we knew that was coming, and we will use the reserves that we set aside last year to pay for that, to cover it. And everything else is just ticking over where it ought to be. It's very difficult to get excited about a Q1 finance report at Huntingdonshire District Council when everything ticks over so nicely for the last 3 and a little bit years. So bearing in mind the time, unless anyone has any particular questions or if Suzanne has anything particular to answer, what I will cover though is a colleague asked the question about no overview and scrutiny comments. The answer is yes. So the finance reports don't go to overview and scrutiny anymore, but Suzanne, Sharon and myself briefed a key opposition member to make sure that he was fully up to speed, he could answer any questions that were coming off it, and then he could talk to the overview scrutiny chair, and we could present if there was something that got to a point that such was decided to be important enough.
Thank you, Councillor Mickleborough. The report on page 263 is inviting us to consider and comment. Are there anything that anybody would like to raise or share or comment on? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I have a question. Capital in-year underspends. In Q1, we underspent on SIL grants by 1.2 million. Can you just tell me more about the timing of that underspend, or what we might do to rectify it? Or maybe that's already happened because this is reporting on Q1.
Looking down the officer table, Suzanne's going to take this for me. Thank you.
We have been reviewing budget and preparing for the new year, and actually we heard from the service that actually some of those are due to the fact that, for example, some of the land that might be used as one of those projects is in probate. So all of those are regular reviews, scrutinised regularly, and actually looking to make sure that we are delivering them where they can be, or they are being delivered where they can be, and that's reviewed, and that we try and spend that money as planned and programmed, and there'll be further work done to look to how we can make sure that we do maximise the use of SIL. So it was noted that actually there are some hurdles that are beyond the delivery control. So it's not a willful not doing it. There are hurdles that can't be overcome at this point in time, but it is under scrutiny by officers.
Thank you. There are no other comments or questions, in which case then, Councillor Mickleborough, you often say that budgets should be boring, and I quite like reports that are sort of boring and it's all on track. And thank you very much to officers, because I know that producing these reports still takes a lot of energy. And actually, the fact that it's all on track, but equally we're managing the SIL aspects of it is deeply reassuring. So I'm looking forward to the Q2 report, but I know there's always a time lag. So we'll look forward to that coming through this cabinet in the future. In which case, moving us on, item 8 is always a sort of to note, but Councillor Kerr, I know that you attend the Hinchinbrook Country Park joint group. Is there anything that you particularly wanted to highlight, or anything for us to note?
I think the main thing to note was the development project that will be going ahead quite shortly, and they were very pleased to hear that there'd be a cafe on site because we're getting a porta cabin.
Fantastic. I know that will be very welcome by those who visit the park. And I know that Greg looks for every opportunity as well for revenue generation, quite rightly. And Councillor Mickleborough is smiling because that's an important part of his portfolio. So that's really good news. So thank you for that. In which case, that brings us to the end of our meeting this evening. Can I thank everybody? And can I thank everybody who stuck with us when we went through, obviously, a set of procedural changes, just to make sure we got all of that right. I think we're always better because actually we genuinely don't predetermine these meetings. That's not right and proper. And you will have seen that live tonight. It genuinely is us debating in the same way that we encourage our overview and scrutiny to do. And that's what you've seen Cabinet do this evening. So if you've stayed with us for the whole length of the meeting, well done, because it's a little bit longer and more complex than usual. But thank you for joining us, and we'll close the meeting there. Thank you.